here tonight to this installment of our study on the Jewish history. And today it's going to be a little different because it's not so much centered around the king, but around a prophet that the Lord sent to the king and talked to him about. So let's go ahead and we'll begin with the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. All right, amen. Tonight, as many of you already, you're in here in Houston area, you know that it's snowing, sleeting, slowing, whatever it is wet rain, freezing rain, just a nasty night to be out. So it's a good thing that you can just sit by your computer all nice and toasty warm and study God's word without getting out into the elements. Good to see Mickey there with us tonight. And of course, Red's over there in Florida, so he's not subject to any of these kind of things that we are over here. So all right, well, I'm going to go ahead and look at where are we at tonight. We're closing in on looking at toward the end of the First Kings over in this area here, and again with we're not even looking at Second Chronicles tonight because it's not part of this narrative that we have here tonight. And it'll pick up later on with some of the things that Ahab did that we'll be looking at in chapter 19. So again, here's just a reminder of what the kingdoms looked like, the northern kingdom and then the southern kingdom. And then where we're studying tonight is just this little narrow band here, just a part of where we are with Ahab, and Asa and Jehoshaphat are not even mentioned in these particular chapters. And so just mostly it's all Ahab and the prophet that was Elijah. Now, are there any comments or questions that anyone might have before we really drill down on this stuff? Okay, so our moment in time, the thing that I try to bring out something from the time frame in which we're studying. And just recently, in fact, last year, they over in Israel, they kind of started excavating and uncovering an area here on the coast. It's up by Haifa on the northern end of Israel, and it's a place that they used to take and make purple dye. Now, why you say is that that important? Well, because it was a very, very lucrative business, and I think the purple dye is mentioned. The word techelet is mentioned something like 38 times in the Bible, and so it was something that was important. These are the little shells, the mollusks that they would use and they would crush to make the purple dye. And it is here it is. I've got there's a picture of one of the kind, and here is another kind of a murex. Okay, it's it's called a murex type. Now this is a little bit more fancy here. This we picked up in the South Pacific when we were living out there, and but it's basically, this is kind of the size of the thing that you're seeing on the screen over there. And can everybody see that okay? I can unshare for just a second, maybe blow this up a bit, and you can see what this looks like. Okay, so that's, and if you look on the behind me there, on the screen. Let's see, where am I? Where's my finger? Here we go. Right there, and right there, back in the bookcases, we got several other types of mollusks that are a murex type, and there's about 7 or 8 different kinds out there. But this particular one was one that um, that produced a purple shell, a purple dye, and it was really hard to get the stuff. It's the dye is extracted from the fluid of it, called a murex trunculus or purpura lapillus. Another name is the Helix eanthina, and then this particular one here is the Murex brandaris, and they live in relatively deep water, but they're caught by putting out baited traps that they suspend from floats, and then the dye is taken from these shells, from the thousands of putrefied, crushed shellfish. They take them, smash them up, take the meat out of it, and they lay it out, and so that it dries out, bakes in the sun, and it's an awful smell. The resulting liquid was used to dye cloth fibers, and it can be manipulated. Of course, they learned how to manipulate the colors based on how long they kept it in there, or anything like that, in the vats. And it could be anything from pink to purple. And then there's a whole nother set of dyes that are red, and I'm going to show you a picture here in a minute of red dyes. But this stuff here was indigenous to Israel, or the area around Israel. Now, this place that we just saw here is actually in Israel, whereas the big purple dye areas, the main industry of it was in Tyre, and that's why they call it the Tyrian dyes, and that's up in here. Let me show you where that is on the map, if my computer would. Okay, right up here in Phoenicia. That was where the center of the dye making industry was, sort of. But there were other places along the coast here, and Haifa being right in here. That's where that other place that I just showed you is. All right, and so here's some of the that place that I showed you is called Shikmona, Tel Shikmona, and here's some of the pottery that was excavated from it. And it's hard to see, but these darker areas here, some of this stuff actually had purple dye. They're a little bit stained with purple dye. And so we look at these things here, and it was very expensive to make. It took in fact, I told you this stuff stinks really bad. Okay, rotting sea urchin stuff. Okay, it really smells bad. And so for Sidon, they had a workshop that made this stuff, but their workshop was located 9 miles south of the city, and so it was a nasty place. In fact, it's Sarepta was the city, and we'll mention that later on in our story tonight. In his natural history, the Roman writer Pliny the Elder, he described how the dye extraction process had been developed. And it's not we don't know for sure how they did it, but they would take 3 days. Salt was added to the mash of this shellfish, the shellfish glands that they would pull out of the shellfish. and it was boiled down in tins. Finally, whole fleeces. Now, I took a picture here of a whole fleece because maybe you don't know what when they shear a sheep, they don't do it like you know, a guy getting a haircut. No, they go in there and they clip right next to the skin of the sheep, and it comes off like just one great big mass off of the sheep, and it would be like kind of like taking a coat off of the sheep. Of course, it's in most cases the wool is heavily, you know, matted together. It's dirty, and they're sheep, so they stink. And so but they would take these fleeces, wash them, and get the dirt out of them, and then they would put them into the vats, and mostly it would they would dye the fleece themselves, rather than, you know, take the wool and you card it and spin it and make it into cloth and then dye it. No, that for some reason they would dye the fleece itself, and then rather than the finished cloth. Um, Now these things, like I said, were very expensive, and according to this historian, his last name is Cassot, it took 10,000. Okay, there's dyeing vats only. This is red, making um, Syrian red dyes for leather, Corinthian leather. Um, and so let's see where I had a here was 10,000 shells to make 1 gram of dye. And so 1 gram of dye can dye the hem of a garment, but not the whole thing. So um, it said these, you know, the number of shells that were discarded there at Sidon, it created a mountain 40 meters high. Well, that's what 120 over 100 130 feet high. Now that's why, you know, you understand how that could happen, and why these dyes were you know, worth more than their weight in gold in uh, now in the year 300 CE, which is, you know, the current era. So that would be about, yeah, 800, 1,000 years before, after the time that we're studying now, but still, the technology hadn't changed much. Uh, they, uh, 1 pound of this purple dye that we're talking about here cost 150,000 denarii, or about 3 pounds of gold. And so that would be equal to about $86,000 for a pound of this purple dye. And so a pound of pre-dyed wool then could set you back maybe about 1 pound of gold. All right, see, you can see how expensive it was, and the high value of the purple cloth is further. You know, you can see it further in that it's listed as tribute when a conqueror would come in and take over a country, and they have to pay him tribute, you know, taxes and whatever. And this goes back to the ninth and eighth centuries, where with the time frame we're studying now, a little bit after 100 years or so after what we're studying now. They That price was, you know, very expensive, just like you know, 300 AD. And so Alexander the Great, he'd said he'd come across 5,000 talents um, of in weight of purple cloth at Susa. Susa is a city up in Babylon, and it was probably acquired through tribute and kept as a permanent deposit of high value, just like a gold. It was the Fort Knox of purple wool. So anyway, that's what that looks like they would have the vats, and I could show you different pictures. Now this is a modern thing, but the technology really hasn't changed a whole heck of a lot to get that Syrian type leather. All right. Any comments or questions before we go on? Nothing. Okay. All right. Keep on going. Now, I'm going to get on into the scriptures here, and um, now Elijah the Tishbite, one of the settlers of Gilead, went to Ahab, as Adonai, God of Israel, lives. This is quote, before whom I stand, there shall be no dew or rain these years except at my word. Then the word of Adonai came to him, saying, leave this place, turn eastward, and hide yourself in the Wadi Cherith, east of the Jordan. It'll come about that you will drink from the wadi, and I've also commanded the ravens to feed you there. So he went and did according to the word of Adonai, and he went and lived in the Wadi Cherith, which is east of the Jordan. And the ravens kept bringing him bread and meat in the morning and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the wadi. Then it came to pass after a while that the wadi dried up, and because there was no rain anywhere in the land. All right, now Elijah was called of God. His name actually means Adonai is my God. And you got the El, which is a name for God, and Yah is that's it's Adonai is my God. And so he was raised up. God always is going to raise up a prophet, and he was raised up in this time of such depravity that Israel had sunk, and he just burst into the palace one day that there with Ahab, and he delivered this devastating message. And also, let me remind you that even in dark days, God always has a remnant, and he always has a prophet. There's always a voice of God, even in very dark days. Keep that in mind as we go forward, even in this country, that we've got some dark days coming, but there are still people who can speak from the throne of God, and God speaks through people to give people peace and direction and so forth. And so Elijah says, there's not going to be any rain here until I say there's going to be rain. And so it ended up being about 3 years worth of drought. And in an agrarian society like that, it's just devastating. That would be hard they certainly didn't prosper, and it would take several years then to recover from that, because crops would have been lost and seed would have been lost and so forth. So Elijah was directed to go back to his own home area across the Jordan, and there at a wadi, or it's a creek, it's an area where you got water running at the bottom. And God said, I'll have ravens come and bring you food. Now, some people, they just absolutely can't. Why in the world they are Bible scholars? I don't understand, but they say, well, these actually weren't ravens; they were merchants or sympathetic people that were bringing food to Elijah, and so forth. They just can't get themselves to agree or to accept the fact that God works miracles. He made those ravens. He can talk raven talk and tell them, okay, I want you to pick up this food, bring it to Elijah so that he will have food to eat. They just cannot accept a miracle. And so that's something for us today. Why can't we accept miracles? We should be able to accept miracles, pray for miracles, and expect miracles. And just for those of us in the Tree of Life congregation, we did get word today from Kim that her mother was doing very much better. So, Baruch Hashem, we're going to keep praying for her. And that's just when I pray for people, I always tell them, okay, you come back and tell me when God answers your prayer, because I expect that there to be an answer. When I pray, I always pray expecting that God will heal somebody. Does he always do it? No. Why? Because he's sovereign. He does what he wants to do, but my job is to lay hands on the sick, pray for them. All right. So and so when just again, people in this idea of praying for folks, people do get healed sometimes when I pray for them, and so I wouldn't say that gives me a gift of healing. I always point to it and says, no, it's the Lord. It's not me. Nothing I had to do with it other than just being obedient and praying for somebody. Okay. So going ahead, here is this over here. You look at the screen. Here's Tishbe. Okay. Tishbe. And this ravine in Kirith, we don't really know. Okay, nobody really can pin it down as to what it was, but this is where Elijah grew up. These are his old stomping grounds, so he would know this area very, very well, where there would be caves, where there would be water, where there would be springs, and so forth. And he's also on the other side of the river, so he's kind of sort of out of the jurisdiction and control of Ahab. So he started out right there at Tishbe, okay? And so then the word of Adonai came to him, saying, arise, go to Zarephath of Sidon and stay there. I have just commanded a widow there to provide for you. So he arose, went to Zarephath, and now he came to the town gate. To his surprise, a widow was there gathering sticks. So he called her and said, please bring a little water in a jar that I may drink. As she was going to fetch it, he called her and said, please bring me a morsel of bread in your hands. So she said, as Adonai, your God lives, I have nothing baked, only a handful of flour in the jar and a little oil in the jug. Now look, I'm gathering a couple of sticks so that I may go in and prepare it for me and my son, that we may eat it and die. Elijah said to her, fear not. Go and do as you said, but first make me a little cake from what you have there, and bring it out to me, and afterwards make some for you and your son. For thus says Adonai, God of Israel, the jar of flour shall not be exhausted, nor shall the jug of oil be empty until the day Adonai sends rain on the land. So she went and did according to the word of Elijah, and she and he and her household ate for many days. The jar of flour was not exhausted, nor did the jug of oil become empty, according to the word of Adonai, which he spoke through Elijah. All right, so Zarephath is up here at the top of Israel, and it's not even in Israel. It's in Phoenicia, way up here, and so it's where I told you where they were there at Sidon, where they had the dye making facility. Well, this Zarephath is the same name, same place that I talked about before, was the place. Let me see if I can find it. Sarepta. Sarepta is a more modern name of Zarephath, and so that's where. So this place, it might have been kind of stinky there, and so it was also right in Phoenicia. Well, guess who else was from Phoenicia? Ahab's wife Jezebel. And so here we see that Elijah was hiding in plain sight. They would not have expected him to be hiding right there in Jezebel's doorstep in her backyard, but there he was. God told him to go there, and so we see that it is about 8-9 miles something, or 8.5 miles south of Sedona, about 14 miles, something like that, north of Tyre. And so during this severe famine, during the reign of King Ahab, that's when Elijah sought out lodging with this widow. And so, miraculously, the widow's small amount of flour and oil, and here's actually some pictures of this area today. It's a coastal town, and it's got a little harbor there. Not a real. It is not a bustling metropolis by any means today. All right, so and so again, it was not in Israel, and this woman that he stayed with, this widow that he stayed with, um, she was not an Israelite. In fact, when she says that, she spoke out and said that your God, talking to Elijah, that as Adonai, your God lives. She's basically making she's kind of swearing, is what it amounts to, making an oath. And she says, as Adonai, your God lives, I have nothing baked, only some flour and in a jar and some oil. So her small supply of flour and oil was not consumed until the famine came to an end. Now, this is one of those cases where God chose to sustain her and Elijah, that he stayed there with her. And so they had enough to eat every day, and they didn't have a surplus, as it were, but God provided for them every day. And that's something that we need to take into account in our own lives, that the God can provide our everyday needs. He just may not give it to us in abundance. If you need a car, he can maybe you could get a little I don't know what would be a little Chevrolet, and not a BMW. It'll get you to and from work. And so God sometimes is like that. He provides what we need, but not more than we need. And so um, that's something that, when that happens, we need to be very thankful for it and accepting of that. And again, it's one of those deals that you've heard me say many times before. I do not preach a prosperity doctrine that God wants you to be wealthy, and he wants you to have everything that your heart desires, and so forth. Well, I'm thinking that there's probably some of us that if we were very, very wealthy and had more money than we knew what to do with, we would probably be very rotten people. And I think that, we would not trust God for our needs if we had more money than we knew what to do with. So God in his mercy gives us what we need, and then the rest of it we need to trust him for. Okay. The flour and the oil, they represent life. I mean, that's, without the flour and the oil, she couldn't make bread. And she would, she and her son, and it says her household, so I don't know if there's somebody else in there, but they would have died. And so God is giving them this gift of life. Now, she was not an Israelite. She was in the area where they worshiped Baal, which in their mythology, he was the god of rain. And in fact, some statues of him show him holding a thunderbolt. and a lightning bolt. And so here is a prime example of the fact that Baal could not sustain them, but here God was. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was sustaining them. Okay, and so let's go on with any comments or questions so far on this. All right. 1 Kings 17. After these things, it came to pass that the son of the woman, the mistress of the house, fell sick, and his sickness getting worse, much worse, until he had no breath left in him. He died. So she said to Elijah, "What do I have to do with you, man of God? Have you come to remind me of my sin and kill my son?" He said to her, "Give me your son." Then he took him from her arms, carried him up to the upper room where he was staying, and laid him on his own bed. He cried out to Adonai and said, "Adonai, my God, have you brought such evil even to this widow with whom I am staying by causing her son to die?" Then he stretched himself upon the child 3 times. He cried out to Adonai and said, "Adonai, my God, please let this child's soul come back into his body." Adonai listened to the cry of Elijah, so that the soul of the child came back into his body, and he was revived. Then Elijah took the child and brought him down to the upper room into the house, and gave him to the mother. And Elijah said, "See, your son is alive." Then the woman said to Elijah, "Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word in your mouth is truth." Now, in a village like that, you can imagine that everybody knew that this kid had died. And so at the same time, then everybody knew that when he came back. So what a testimony to the power of God, and to the character of Elijah, who everybody would have known it was a prophet. And because all of those kind of things get passed around in those little villages. Now, the sickness that the widow's son had would correspond kind of to Israel's spiritual condition at the time. And the widow incorrectly blamed herself for her son's predicament, and Elijah realized that only God could bring the boy back, and only God could put life back into him. So he called on God in prayer to do that. And so then often in cases of miraculous restoration, God's servant placed his hand on the afflicted one. I mean, that's what we do. When we pray for somebody, we place a hand on them. And because that's why do we do that? Well, because the Bible tells us to do that. We'll lay hands on the sick and they will recover. So he did that to indicate that the power of God in him was passing to the needy individual. In this instance, Elijah, he placed his whole body against the boy's body for the same reason. Now, this actually is the first time that we see written in the Tanakh, in the Holy Scriptures, of someone being raised from the dead, the resurrection, a restoration of life from a dead person. This is the very first time that it's recorded. And Elijah, he just prayed out, man. He was serious in this prayer. And it's something that we all need to, when we pray for somebody, we need to be serious about praying for them. And that's how you get things from the Lord, is you have to pray. And that's his plan. And so that we need to go along with that plan. When you need something, pray about it. And in the process of this, Elijah learned the power of God and the power of prayer. If he didn't already know it, he sure saw it now. And he applied both of these lessons in the contest that he's going to have right in the future with the prophets of Baal. Now, this was a real confidence booster. Again, one of those things that when I pray for somebody and I tell them, come back and tell me when you are healed, because that builds my faith, builds my confidence in what God can do. And it doesn't build any confidence in what I can do, because I can do nothing. It's only through God that people are healed or whatever. Okay, so um, going ahead with this we're in chapter 18 now. And that was after many days that the word of Adonai came to Elijah. So he lived there for who knows, maybe well, it's in the third year, so he had been there maybe a couple of years. It says, show yourself to Ahab, then I will send rain on the land. So Elijah went to show himself to Ahab. Now the famine was severe. Now I've got a long reading here. I think I've only well, maybe I did put all this up. It's a long reading, but I think it's just kind of interesting reading. So the famine was severe in Samaria, and Ahab summoned to Obadiah, who was the steward in the palace. And now Obadiah feared Adonai greatly, which, wow, he feared God, and he was in Ahab's palace as a steward, and he was still surviving. So when Jezebel was cutting off the prophets of Adonai, in other words, when she was killing them, Obadiah took 100 prophets, hid them 50 to a cave, and provided them with bread and water. Then Ahab said to Obadiah, go through the land and all the springs of water and all the wadis. Perhaps we may find grass and so keep the horses and mules alive and not lose all the animals. So they divided the land between them to explore it. Ahab himself, the king, went one way, and while Obadiah went another way by himself. And so he fell on his face and said, is it let's see, I lost my place here. So as Obadiah was on the road, all of a sudden, Elijah met him. When he recognized him, he fell on his face and said, is it you, my Lord Elijah? And he said, it is I. He answered him, go tell your Lord, look, Elijah is here. And so Obadiah says, wow, how have I sinned? He replied, that you are that you're giving your servant into the hand of Ahab to put me to death? As Adonai your God lives, there is no nation or kingdom where my master is not sent to search for you. And when they said, he is not here, he made that kingdom or nation swear that they could not find you. Now you're saying, go tell your Lord, Elijah is here. But as soon as I leave, the Ruach Adonai may carry you off where I wouldn't know. Then when I come and tell Ahab and he can't find you, then he'll kill me. Now I, your servant, have feared Adonai since my youth. Wasn't my Lord told what I did when Jezebel slaughtered the prophets of Adonai? How I hid 100 of Adonai's prophets, 50 to a cave, and provided them with bread and water. Now, so now you say, go tell your Lord, look, Elijah's here. He'll kill me. Then Elijah says, as Adonai Svaot, God of the Lord of hosts, lives, before whom I stand, I will surely show myself to him today. And so Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him then. Ahab went to meet Elijah. Now, when Ahab saw Elijah, Ahab said to him, is it you, the one who causes trouble for Israel? But he answered and said, I have not troubled Israel. Rather, it is you and your father's house for forsaking the mitzvot of Adonai and going after the Baalim. And now then, send and gather to me all Israel at Mount Carmel, together with the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah, and eat at Jezebel's table. Or who eat at Jezebel's table. Okay, so we've got Elijah. Now he's told by God, go and confront Ahab. I want you to go there and then when you do that, I'll be bringing the rain. So he goes out there and he runs into Obadiah, which I thought was an incredible thing, that Obadiah goes in one half of Israel, and Ahab himself was going in another half of Israel to search out water and pasture for his horses and mules, for his war making machine. So Ahab is wanting to make sure that he's taken care of, and pretty much, to heck with everybody else, but he wanted himself to be taken care of. But then when Elijah appears to Obadiah, Obadiah is just, he's very afraid. Why? Because he's afraid that if he goes back and tells Ahab that, okay, I saw Elijah today, who you've been looking for months and years. Well, I found him today, and he's at this spot. And then when Ahab comes to find you, well, the Lord's Spirit has taken you away someplace, and so there I am. He is going to shoot the messenger, and I'll die. And so Elijah told him, no, no, no. He said, you're not going to die. Go and tell him. And so basically, Obadiah goes and tells Ahab. They meet, Elijah and Ahab meet up again after 3 years. And the first thing that Ahab does is start bad mouthing Elijah. And he called Elijah you who troubles Israel. And so that is just a nice way of saying, you, Elijah, you are nothing but whatever curse words you want to plug in there. That's what he's doing there. And so Elijah said, nope, not me. I'm not the troubler of Israel. It's you and your house, because you're the one that's not following God's precepts and his commandments. And you got all this Baal worship and Asherah poles and all that. He says, you're the culprit, not me. Don't turn this back around. Don't project your sin onto me. And then he tells him, now you send and gather to me all Israel at Mount Carmel, together with the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah, and they said the prophets that eat at Jezebel's table. So basically, she was sponsoring this false worship, this idol worship, and so Elijah says, "Okay, get together with these guys, and we are going to. I'm going to meet up with them." So. Ahab sent word to all the children of Israel and gathered the prophets together at Mount Carmel. Then Elijah approached all of the people and said, how long will you waver between two opinions? If Adonai is God, follow him. But if Baal is, follow him. But the people didn't answer, not even a word. Then Elijah said to the people, I am the only prophet of Adonai left, but Baal's prophets are 450 men. Now, let them give us 2 young bulls. Let them choose one bull for themselves, cut it into pieces, lay it on the wood, put no fire underneath, while I prepare the other bull, lay it on the wood, and put no fire underneath. Then you will call on the name of your God, and then I will call on the name of Adonai. The God who answers with fire, he is God. So all the people responded and said, that's good. That's a good thing. So then Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose one bull for yourselves and prepare it first, since you are so many, and then call on the name of your God, but put no fire underneath. So they took the bull that they gave him, prepared it, and called on the name of Baal from morning until noon, and crying, "Oh Baal, answer us!" But there was no voice, no one answering. So then they started dancing, leaping around, doing their Baal dance around this altar. And when it was around noon, Elijah mocked them and said, "Hey, shout a little bit louder! After all, he's a god. Maybe he's deep in thought." Or maybe he's relieving himself. Maybe, he went to the outhouse and is going to the bathroom. or he's off on a journey someplace, or perhaps he's just asleep. You must wake him up. So they shouted even louder and cut themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until the blood gushed over them. When midday was past, they kept prophesying ecstatically until the time of offering of the evening sacrifice. But there was no voice, no one answering, no one paying attention. Then Elijah said to the people, "Come near to me." So all the people came closer to him. Then he repaired the damaged altar of Adonai. Elijah took 12 stones, like the number of the tribes of the sons of Jacob, to whom the word of Adonai had come, saying, "Israel shall be your name." And with the stones he built an altar in the name of Adonai. Then he made a trench around this altar, large enough to contain 2 measures of seed. Then he put the wood in order, cut the bull in pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said, "Fill 4 jars with water and pour it on the burnt offering and on the wood." Then he said a second time, and they did it a second time. Then he said a third time, and they did it a third time. So the water ran around the altar, and he also filled up the trench with water. Now, it was at the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice that Elijah the prophet came near and said, "Adonai, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel." I love that phrase. Let it be known today that you are God in Israel. And um, that you have turned your heart back again. Let the fire of Adonai, then the fire of Adonai fell, and it consumed the burnt offering, the wood, the stones, and the dust. It licked up the water that was in the trench. When all the people saw it, they fell on their faces, and they said, "Adonai, he's God. Adonai, he is God." Then Elijah said to them, "Seize the prophets of Baal, let not a single one of them escape." So they seized them, and Elijah brought them down to the Wadi Kishon and slew them there. Uh, so here we have, one of the most famous stories in all of the Bible. I think that when Elijah told Ahab to gather everybody around, he saw this as an opportunity to get rid of Elijah, because here's got you got 450 prophets of Baal, and so he figured, well, they'll cook up something there, and that they'll defeat Elijah, and so then I'll never have to worry about Elijah again. So Mount Carmel is on the border between Israel and Phoenicia. Okay, in Phoenicia they have their official language or official theology is Baal worship and Asherah worship, whereas in Israel the official um, religion um, is the worship of God, our God, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So it was really far from that, but anyway, that was the border between those two. So this is kind of neutral ground, no man's land here, as it were. And the priests of Baal, they they fail totally, because with the altar laid out there, theirs is dry, and they call, and of course Baal is not a god. He could not bring down fire from heaven. Um, and so then Elijah, on the other hand, says, "Okay, I got mine ready to go." He'd built it all up, and he's got the fire, and he got the bull cut up, and he says, "Okay, now before we do this, let's soak it with water." Okay, now go ahead and soak it all again with water. And then finally, a third time, fill it up. Go ahead and fill that, just put all the water on it, and it filled up the trench that was around it. So then at that point, then he called on God, and the fire came down and consumed not only the burnt offering, but all of the wood, all of the stones of the altar. It consumed the stones of the altar. I mean, that's a horrendous fire. And then it dried out all of the the water that was in that trench around that. And so at that point, the people understand that, okay, no, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, he's God, he's the one. And so Abraham says, okay, seize all these prophets, and they took them down the mountain to the valley of Kishon and Wadi Kishon. You can stand up on the Mount Carmel and actually look down from the cliff there to where they rounded all these priests up, prophets up, prophets of Baal, and slaughtered them, executed them. And so, in fact, I took some pictures here. I mean, I didn't take these pictures, but they're like some of the pictures that I took when I was up there. And you can see that here's this Kishon River that's kind of running right here. It's kind of hard to see right in there. Okay, this is a highway here. Okay, but right in here, in this area here, is where they took the prophets down there and they slaughtered them. Okay, they executed all of them. Now, here's another shot looking from Mount Carmel. You look over here and you see Nazareth and Mount Tabor, where the configuration was, right in this area, and then Hill of Moreh, and then Gilboa over here. This whole valley, you know, when you're thinking about it, that's the part of that is the Armageddon Valley, the Valley of Megiddo. Okay, and so that's one of the reasons I wanted to go there and look at it, so I could reconnoiter a little bit and look at the whole scene, so that when I come back with Yeshua, I would already have been there and know what the ground looks like. All right, you laugh, huh? Okay, so here's another shot, a little bit more of a wide angle area of that. Okay, and so any comments or questions so far? All right. So then Elijah said to Ahab, "Go up, eat and drink, for there's a sound of rain." And so, you know, basically Ahab hadn't eaten all day. He was caught up in all the excitement of this. And so Elijah told him, "Hey, you king, go ahead and eat and drink, refresh yourself, and get your strength back." So Ahab went up to eat and drink, but Elijah went up to the top of Mount Carmel, crouched on the ground, put his face between his knees, and then he said to his servant, "Go up, look toward the sea." So he went up and looked, and he said, "There's nothing." Then he said, "Go back." So this went on 7 times. And then it was the 7th time when he said, "Look, a cloud as small as a man's hand is rising from the sea." Then he said, "Go and say to Ahab, harness your chariot and go down before the rain stops you." In a little while the sky grew black with clouds and wind, and there was a heavy rain, Ahab mounted and rode and headed to Jezreel. Now the hand of Adonai was on Elijah, so he girded up his loins and outran Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. Okay, so Elijah prayed, and then the rains came. Now it didn't come all of a sudden. It was working. So it looks like that God had sent a front through. He was working through natural ways, natural causes. God answers prayers. He doesn't always answer a miraculous way. Sometimes he answers prayer in a natural way. You're healed by your body healing itself sometimes. And so in this case, looked like a front was coming through, and he says, "I can see," on the 7th time, he says, "I can see a cloud out there about the size of a man's hand." So you just figure out, okay, put your hand out there, a man's fist, and you see that. Well, that's not a very big cloud off in the horizon, but here it came. When he saw that, Elijah said, "Okay, tell Ahab to better get off this mountain, because the rain is coming." And so he did that. Ahab started driving toward Jezreel, And then said the Spirit of God came on Elijah, and he girded up his loins. What does that mean? That means that he takes his belt and reaches down and with this big belt girdle kind of a thing. We'd call it a sash maybe. He would reach down, pull his robe up between his legs, and he would run that sash around that, so that basically his robe is not flapping around his ankles when he's running. That's what it's called, girding up your loins. That all that means is you pull your clothes up and fasten them, tie them up to where you can run without fear of falling down on with your robe. And that can easily be done. I can tell you a story about that real quickly. Years and years ago, first time I ever wore a choir robe. We were at this church that you had to walk upstairs to get up into the choir loft. Okay, the very first time they finally let me into the choir, I was I think a freshman in high school, maybe something like that, because you had to be a certain age before they'd let you in the choir. And so I was walking up there, and I didn't know this stuff about robes and things. So I took my first step, and didn't know that I had stepped on my robe. And then I reached over to do the second step, and then boom, okay, I stepped on my robe the second time, and then I tried to get out of it, and I pulled. By the time I got to the third step, my chin was just about level with the stair steps there, and then I had to stop and pull the robe up and everything. It was quite the show, and everybody got tickled, and that was my debut, my entrance into the world of church music, and what a debut it was. And so anyway, that's what girding your loins up means, is pulling that robe up and tying it off so that you can run. And then it says that um, Elijah started running toward Jezreel. Well, Elijah was up on top of the mountain. He was up there on the very top. And that is a lot of, I mean, it's rugged territory when you drive up there. Even now today with a road, it's still kind of rough, rugged. But if you were trying to climb down that mountain, you're climbing down goat paths, and so he had to climb down there. Well, Ahab already, he was on the road down there below, and he was heading off toward Jezreel. And it said that Elijah, by the Spirit of God, miraculously outran a horse and chariot and made it to Jezreel before Ahab. Can you imagine getting there to Jezreel, and Ahab pulls up there in his chariot, and the horses are all lathered, and they're hot and they're sweaty and so forth, and they get there, and Elijah standing up there at the gate said, "Hey, what took you so long?" So just kind of in my mind, okay, it's kind of comical that God would do something like that. So anyway, that was just a miraculous thing. So these two chapters have lots of miracles in them. The oil and the flour never running out. The little son recovers from dying, and the fire coming down from heaven and consuming all of that altar. And then now Elijah beats Ahab back to Jezreel. So it's just quite a good story, and Elijah wins. Then we'll see next week. Then, even at the top of victory, in the heat of victory and everything, Elijah's trying to snatch defeat out of the jaws of victory next week, and we'll study on that. Any comments or questions tonight on this? I've run over just a little bit, but it's